Number 1. The milk float mornings. If you grew up in 60s Britain, mornings started with a sound that doesn't really exist anymore. The quiet electric hum of a milk float and the clink of bottles on a doorstep. Every street had one. The milkman knew which houses took gold tops, who was away on holiday, and who still owed for last week. You didn't order online, you left an empty bottle and a note under the rim. Simple system, and it worked. Back then, almost every household got milk delivered. About 90% at the start of the decade. It wasn't nostalgia, it was logistics. Refrigerators were smaller, supermarkets were rare, and local dairies handled the last mile. You'd sometimes find extras balanced on the step. Orange juice, eggs, even a small packet of butter if you were lucky. Kids nicked the foil tops for school art projects, and cats helped themselves before anyone got to the door. By the late 70s, supermarkets and plastic cartons took over. The floats stuck around a bit longer, mostly out of habit. Then one day, they just stopped coming. Anyway, that's how Britain woke up. Not to alarms or traffic, but to a delivery route that connected almost every doorstep in the country. Number 2. The 3-channel evening. It's funny. People talk about only 3 channels, like it was some golden age. Honestly, it sounds more like waiting for a bus that never comes. By the mid-60s, you had BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. That was it. 3 rectangles of light in a living room, and you'd sit through half of Songs of Praise just to catch the weather. Families gathered like it was an event, but really it was just because there wasn't much else to do. No remote control either. The youngest got sent to change the dial. You'd think that built character. Maybe it just built arguments. BBC Two launched in 1964. A bit posher, a bit weirder. Black and white for the first year. Because not everyone had the right set, colour TV didn't properly hit until 1969. And even then, most people didn't bother until the early 70s. There's this odd nostalgia about everyone watching the same thing at once. Sure, but it also meant if you hated the black and white minstrel show, you were just stuck. Also, the test cards used to scare some kids. The clown, the girl, that eerie music, people still remember that more clearly than half the programs. Number 3, the school dinners nobody escaped. People like to laugh about school dinners, the lumpy mash, the mystery meat, the pink custard. But that's not really fair. They did what they were supposed to do, feed everyone, cheaply, every day. The system came first, then the memories. Post-war Britain still ran on efficiency. Rationing had ended, but the habits hadn't. Meals weren't about excitement. They were about structure, calories, cost, repetition. You'd line up with a tray, no choices, no fuss. The dinner ladies ran it like an assembly line, and somehow remembered who always left their peas. There was no shame in seconds and no escape from liver. Critics call it joyless. Maybe. But for plenty of kids, it was the only hot meal they got all day, and you can't call that nothing. Some still remember the smell. Stewed cabbage, sponge pudding, the clatter of trays. One kid in every school drank the custard straight from the jug, which somehow managed to be both heroic and deeply wrong at the same time. Say what you like about the food. Those school dinners built endurance, or maybe just a lifelong suspicion of beige. And in 1960s Britain, that was probably good preparation for everything else. Number 4. The corner shop economy. Before supermarkets took over, Britain ran on corner shops. That's just how it worked. Every street had one, sometimes 2. The kind of place where you could buy a loaf, a tin of beans, and a bit of gossip before the kettle boiled. They weren't romantic. They were practical. Usually family-run, often open ridiculous hours, stocked by instinct rather than plan. If the biscuits sold, you ordered more. If they didn't, you stacked them higher and hoped someone would take pity. You'd see the same faces every morning. Workers grabbing cigarettes, kids spending pocket money, older neighbours paying on the slate until Friday. Nobody thought of it as community. It just was. Supermarkets started creeping in during the late 50s, and by the 60s you could feel the shift. Self-service was quicker, cleaner, less personal, which, to be fair, suited plenty of people. But the corner shops carried on because they knew what their customers actually wanted. A chat, a bit of credit, a banana that wasn't rock hard. The owners worked behind the counter 7 days a week and knew the difference between someone struggling and someone trying it on. They were small, yes, but vital. The quiet gears of daily life. Even now, in a world of contactless and 24-hour everything, there's something reassuring about that memory. A bell over the door, a nod of recognition, and the feeling that someone actually knew your name. Number 5. Mods, rockers, and the coat you weren't allowed to wear. And it always comes back to the coat. That heavy parka with the fur hood. the one that marked you as a mod before you even said a word. Parents hated it. Teachers rolled their eyes. But that's what made it work. The mods weren't trying to start a movement. They just wanted to look sharp, listen to good music, and be somewhere that wasn't grey. The scooters came later, first as transport, then as symbols, shiny and ridiculous and completely perfect for showing off outside cafes that didn't really serve coffee properly yet. Somewhere along the way, the rockers appeared. Leather jackets, motorbikes, louder engines, louder everything. And the papers decided it was a war. It wasn't really. It was more like a weekend hobby that got out of hand. A few beach towns, a few fights, and suddenly everyone had to pick a side. The coats mattered because they told people who you were before you opened your mouth. That's how identity worked then. Visible, simple, defiant. The funny part is how quickly it ended. Within a few years, the same people were in different clothes, dancing to different records. Youth culture just kept mutating. One style gave way to another and another until you can't tell where one ends. The coat stayed behind, though, a leftover symbol from a time when you could tell someone's politics just by the way they zipped it up. Number 6. When everything shut on Sundays. Imagine trying to explain Sunday trading laws to someone born after 1995. It sounds like a joke. The entire country closed for the day by choice. Until 1994, most of Britain really did stop on Sundays. Shops were locked, pubs had restricted hours, and you could buy petrol, but not bread. The Shops Act of 1950 made it illegal for most retailers to open, a rule that lingered long past the era it was written for. It was meant to protect workers' rest and preserve the Sabbath, which made sense in 1950 when almost everyone went to church. By the 1960s, though, the law was already out of sync with real life. Half the population didn't attend services, and more people worked shifts or weekends. Technically, you could still buy food at small confectionery or refreshment outlets, which is why newsagents sold everything from milk to shoe polish. Some big stores tried loopholes. Garden centres, DIY shops, car dealers all claimed to be displaying goods rather than selling them. Enforcement was inconsistent, and public patience thinner every year. When Parliament finally passed the Sunday Trading Act in 1994, the change looked revolutionary, but it was mostly catching up to what had already happened quietly for decades. Even in the 60s, service stations, corner shops, and market stalls had found their own workarounds. The myth is that Britain suddenly opened its doors one Sunday morning. In reality, the locks had been loosening for years. It just took until the 90s for the law to notice. Number 7. The big British holiday getaway. People think the 1960s were all about package holidays in Spain, but that didn't really take off until the 70s. In the 60s, most families still holidayed in Britain. Blackpool, Margate, Skegness. Cheap, close, familiar. Package deals existed, sure. Horizon Holidays started chartering flights in 1950. But flying abroad was still something you bragged about afterwards. The real British holiday was domestic, and it started with a car boot full of luggage and a queue somewhere on the A5. It wasn't glamorous, but it was collective. Families in caravans, coach trips, the smell of sun lotion and petrol. Butlins was the dream, if you could afford it. Swimming pools, entertainment, endless buffets. Pontins if you couldn't. Everyone wore the same smiles in the group photos anyway. Hotels made you pay extra for hot water, boarding houses had strict dinner times, and beach weather was optimistic at best. Some people hated it, called it tacky or predictable, but it gave kids independence and parents a break. You made friends by lunchtime and forgot them by Friday. And here's the part people don't admit. The routine was half the point. Same roads, same towns, same postcards every year. Britain liked repetition. Holidays were never about escape. They were about doing something ordinary somewhere else. Number 8. The telephone you shared with everyone. People imagine everyone in the 60s had a phone sitting neatly on a hallway table, but that's not true. Not even close. Fewer than half of British homes had one by the mid-decade. If you did, it was probably rented from the GPO, hardwired into the wall, heavy enough to hurt your foot if you dropped it. You couldn't buy your own handset. You called the operator for long distance. You paid extra for the ringer volume to be adjustable. It was all very official and slightly intimidating. There were party lines, too. Shared connections where you'd pick up and hear someone else already talking. Neighbours mostly. Sometimes strangers. Etiquette said you waited until they finished, but people listened anyway, and the cord never reached quite far enough for privacy. Conversations were quick, practical, efficient. The click of the rotary dial became part of the soundscape of the house, like the boiler or the clock. Not everyone remembers the technical side, but that's what fascinates me. How something so physical, so mechanical, still managed to feel alive. The GPO engineers in grey coats, climbing poles, wiring homes. The switchboards staffed entirely by women, the careful maintenance of a network that barely anyone fully understood. We think communication's instant now, but there was something deliberate about waiting for a call you couldn't predict. Something satisfying about the ring itself. You didn't just answer it, you prepared for it.